I'm Joseph, and I'm here with my partner, Taylor. And if you've been anywhere on the internet or into sci-fi at all, you may have heard of a science fiction universe known as Warhammer 40,000. If you already know what this universe is, then why are you watching this video? Because you want to hear my sexy voice and support our channel. Why else? But if you don't, let me take a minute here and explain to you what Warhammer 40,000 actually is. Warhammer 40,000, or 40K for short, started out all the way back in September of 1987. A British company called Games Workshop put out a miniature game called Rogue Trader, and it would play sort of like Dungeons & Dragons, except it was in a sci-fi universe. That universe was called Warhammer 40,000. Now, Warhammer encompasses both Warhammer 40,000 and Games Workshop's fantasy universe called Warhammer, Age of Sigmar. Now, are the two universes connected? No, neither are linked to each other. That would be like saying that Lord of the Rings and Star Wars are in the same universe. Is it possible? No. But are people going to try and make it possible? Absolutely. The universe of Warhammer as a whole has evolved into many different video games, books, and spin-off board and minifigure games. Some of the most popular 40K games being titles such as Space Hulk Deathwing, Battlefleet Gothic, Warhammer 40,000, Space Marine, and the Dawn of War series. Before we get into the video, there's a couple of things that should be noted about the Warhammer 40,000 universe that set it apart from other sci-fi universes. The first thing is that the scale of everything is massive. Wars and battles that would dwarf anything that we've seen in real history happen on an almost minute-to-minute basis. So it goes without saying that war is just part of life. Another thing is that the universe is called Grim Dark, which basically means that everything is super dark, both in aesthetic sense and in the story sense. The last thing that truly sets everything in 40K apart is that everything is overpowered. And even then, things aren't overpowered. They just have so many numbers to them. Like for instance, the infantry known as the Imperial Guard, which are just regular people who fight for the Imperium, that it makes it so that they could literally just drown you in bodies if they wanted to. So what is Warhammer 40,000 actually about? Well, if you couldn't tell from the title, it takes place in the 41st millennium. Humanity has set out and conquered a crap ton of the known galaxy, but yet still one of the major goals of the Imperium is to locate lost planets from the days of the Dark Age of technology. That's the fun part. Since in 40K, humanity is basically the main faction, we will give a brief explanation of what the Imperium of Man is. As each millennia past, humanity would eventually reach the point of being able to travel across the stars. We would build a massive galaxy-spanning human federation, and with this, we would enter a new golden age of unprecedented scientific advancement. This golden age would last for about 10,000 years before it would all collapse, as humanity would not be able to use the warp for faster than light travel. Now, what is the warp? Basically, there are two different universes. One of them is called real space, which is the one that we live in. It's the real physical world. The other is called the immaterium, or the warp for short, which is basically a parallel universe to ours that sometimes spills over into the materium or our dimension. Think of it as we're in the real world right now, and there's some kind of alternate dimension of pure psychic energy that lives with us, but it's not technically in the real world. If it sounds confusing, don't worry, it doesn't get any better. For a few thousand years, humanity would be in an age of total chaos and anarchy, called the Age of Strife. This would remain so until a mythical figure who has been on Earth for thousands of years, pretty much since the dawn of humanity, arises and leads humanity as one singular force to get back together and conquer the universe. This figure would only be known by one title. He would be known as the Emperor of Mankind. The Emperor would create a bunch of genetically altered demigod-like beings called Primarchs, which were to be his sons and his generals, who would lead humanity's armies in the Great Crusade. The Primarchs, however, would be stolen away from him by the forces of chaos. I know, it's weird, just roll with me. The Emperor, after this, decides to launch the largest military campaign in humanity's history, which would be called the Great Crusade. And while on the crusade, he would be reunited with his sons, one at a time. All is going fine and well until his favorite and most powerful son, named Horus, gets corrupted by chaos and turns roughly half of the Imperium against the other half, and it becomes one of the biggest wars that the galaxy has ever seen, called the Horus Heresy. It all comes to a giant climax when Horus and the Emperor himself get into a fight, and the Emperor kills Horus but is gravely wounded in the process, and now is immobile, and having to use his psychic powers to help out humanity. He is currently hooked up to a device called the Golden Throne, which helps him stay alive for thousands and thousands of years that have gone by since his mortal wounding. And due to roughly half of the Imperium being corrupted by chaos, the modern-day Imperium is very skeptical and distrusting of one another. It is a superstitious and dictatorial state and has civil wars and infighting all of the time. A big part of 40K as well is that due to bad experiences with AI and technology, a lot of things haven't really progressed all that much in terms of technology. And the Imperium is so big that certain planets might still be using technology akin to what we had during World War II, whereas others might be using stuff right out of Star Trek. This video is just a basic overview of what 40K is. We haven't even begun to get into any of the other races, which are vital to understanding what the universe is. But I've instead focused on the Imperium as to the fact that it is sort of the main faction in most of the lore surrounding the 40K universe. That's a very, very, very general overview of Warhammer 40,000 universe. So stick around as we dive into more specifics of the universe, and let us get into some Warhammer 40,000 stories and more tales beyond time.